January 332 BC, the eastern Mediterranean coast, Phoenicia, Tyre. Imagine a fortress rising straight out of the sea and then realizing you cannot surround an island with infantry standing on a beach. You cannot starve a city while ships still slip in food from the open water. You cannot break walls your army cannot even reach. That was the wall Alexander's 30,000 Macedonians hit the moment they arrived. Tyre sat almost 700 meters offshore, a distance that looked small on a map and became an abyss for a land army. Its towers rose straight from the waves, its harbors guarded by warships, its walls offering no ground for a single ladder or siege tower. The battlefield in front of Alexander was not a plain or a gate. It was the sea itself. Inside the island, the Tyrians trusted three things: their walls, their navy, and the Mediterranean. They had reason to. 2 centuries earlier, Babylon had besieged Tyre for 13 years and still failed to take it. Now, Alexander stood on the shore with a terrifying land army and almost no fleet worth the name. His soldiers could see the city, hear its defenders, watch its banners in the sea wind, and still could not touch it. Any normal commander would have withdrawn or negotiated. Alexander chose something the Tyrians found laughable. He would tear down the old mainland city, drag its stones into the Mediterranean, and build a road through the sea itself. Tyre believed the water would keep him out. Alexander decided to make the water carry him in. He needed Tyre broken before he could safely move on Egypt. Left free, its harbors could threaten his supply lines and keep the sea behind him hostile. So the causeway began. Stone was pulled from old Tyre, timber and rope and piles gathered along the coast, and the first loads dropped into the shallows. From the walls, the Tyrians mocked the Macedonians, throwing rubble into the sea, until they noticed the sea was disappearing. Before the stones fell, Alexander tried the city one last time, peacefully. He asked to sacrifice inside Tyre's temple of Melkart, a request that, if granted, would have meant Tyre acknowledging him as master of the city. They refused, offering the old mainland temple instead. Then, pushed further, they killed his envoys and threw the bodies from the walls into the same sea Alexander still could not cross. From that moment, the siege stopped being only strategy. It became revenge. The causeway crept forward day by day, wooden piles driven into the seabed, rubble packed between them, the whole structure looking from above like land, forcing its way into the Mediterranean. The closer it came to the walls, the more dangerous the work became. Water deepened, waves grew harder, and Tyrian arrows began falling on the men hauling stone with both hands full of rope and timber. Small Tyrian boats darted out from the harbors, archers firing into laborers who had no free hand for a shield. Alexander answered by turning the head of the causeway into a fighting platform. Hide screens for cover, siege towers wrapped in rawhide against fire, catapults mounted high to answer the walls. The road was no longer just construction. It was a battlefield that stretched across open water. Tyre understood exactly what the causeway meant. If it reached the wall, the sea would no longer be enough to save them. So they struck harder, boats pressing closer, archers firing more aggressively, stones and arrows aimed at workers, engineers, and the towers themselves. Then they unleashed their deadliest weapon. An old transport ship was packed with dry wood, pitch, sulfur, and fuel, towed toward the causeway's head under cover of the Tyrian fleet, and released to drift into Alexander's siege towers. Flames climbed the rawhide coverings, smoke rolled across the water, Tyrian ships fired on anyone who tried to fight the blaze. The towers collapsed into the sea, weeks of labor burned in an afternoon, and for the first time, Alexander's impossible road had been stopped cold. The lesson was brutal and clear. As long as Tyre controlled the water, it could burn any road built toward it, attack from angles no infantry could answer, and keep its harbors open for food and reinforcement. The siege could not be won from the shore alone. Alexander needed the sea itself. He turned to the coastal cities that had already submitted, Sidon, Byblos, and the rest of Phoenicia, and to the kings of Cyprus, and within weeks had assembled a fleet of more than 200 ships around Tyre. The commander, who had barely had enough vessels to touch the city, now commanded an armada large enough to take it from the water. Tyre's navy, once free to strike at will, was pushed back and sealed inside its own harbors. Phoenician ships blocked the southern entrance, Cypriot ships closed the northern one. The city that had trusted the sea now watched the sea turn into a trap. Alexander pressed artillery closer on land, while engines mounted on ships struck from the water, hitting Tyre from two directions at once. The defenders answered with everything they had. Divers sent to cut the anchor cables of Macedonian ships until Alexander replaced the ropes with iron chains the divers couldn't cut. Boulders dropped into the shallows to keep assault ships from the walls, dragged away under fire by Macedonian crews. Extra wooden towers raised on the battlements for higher firing positions. Burning arrows launched at ships and siege engines, secondary barriers built behind cracked sections of wall. This was not a siege of patient waiting. It was a moving, grinding fight between engineers, sailors, and desperate defenders. Tyre found one more opening. A naval strike from the northern harbor caught part of the Cypriot fleet off guard and damaged several ships. For a moment, the blockade looked like it might crack. Alexander moved fast, cutting off the Tyrian squadron before it could escape, driving the ships back and destroying or trapping them inside the harbor. After that, Tyre's navy could no longer save the city. The walls still stood, but the sea no longer belonged to the men behind them. Alexander searched for the one weak point where all his pressure could finally break through, and found it near the southern wall, close to the water. Assault ships carrying battering rams pushed in under covering fire, striking the same stretch of wall again and again until stone dust fell into the sea and cracks opened faster than the defenders could repair them. At dawn, the final assault began. Catapults from the causeway and from the ships pounded the battlements to pin the defenders down, while rams mounted on warships hammered the weakened wall through spray and smoke. At the same moment, Phoenician and Cypriot ships pressed the harbor entrances, forcing Tyre to fight on three fronts at once: the breach, the harbors, and the causeway threatening to become a gate. Defenders scattered between threatened points, unable to hold all of them with equal strength. This was the pressure Alexander had built for 7 months, finally closing like a fist. His elite hypaspists led the way through the breach. Boarding bridges dropped against broken masonry as soldiers climbed over wet rubble, with waves striking below them. Tyrians rushed the gap, desperate, knowing that losing this ground meant losing the island itself. Shields crashed against broken stone. Spears fought for space in a passage barely wide enough for 2 men. But more Macedonians kept crossing the bridges, and the harbor attacks kept pulling defenders away from the wall, until the pressure became too much to hold in any one place. The Macedonians got a foothold inside Tyre, and once soldiers stood inside the wall, the sea could no longer protect anyone. The fight spread into the streets, rooftops, and temples. Tyrian fighters tried to make a final stand at the city center. For them, everything they had trusted had failed at once. The sea had not kept the enemy out. The wall had not held the breach. The harbors had not saved the city. After 7 months of resistance, Tyre's walls, harbors, and sea defenses collapsed together. The city paid a brutal price for those 7 months, and for the envoys thrown into the sea at the siege's start. Thousands of defenders and civilians died in the final assault. Survivors were sold into slavery. Ancient sources describe mass crucifixions along the shore. Some found shelter inside temples. Others survived only through the mercy of the Sidonians among Alexander's allies. The island, once thought untouchable, had been broken by force. But Tyre's fall reached far beyond its own walls. A major naval base tied to Persian power was gone. Enemy ships lost a critical shelter on the Phoenician coast. Alexander's supply lines were finally safe, and the road south toward Gaza and Egypt lay open. Gaza resisted and was crushed in turn. Egypt opened its gates without a fight. There Alexander was crowned pharaoh, and there he founded the city that would carry his name, Alexandria, later one of the great centers of learning and power in the ancient world. None of it happens without the causeway. For centuries before Tyre, island cities had believed the sea itself was a wall. That distance alone could keep a land army away forever. Tyre believed it too, and for a long time Tyre was right. Alexander proved otherwise. A city guarded by open water could still be reached. A wall rising straight from the sea could still be broken. Even geography could be attacked and overcome. The causeway outlived the battle. Built from the broken stones of the old mainland city, it survived arrows, fire ships, storms and counterattacks, and carried workers, towers and rams across open water until the wall finally gave. Long after the fighting ended, the road remained. Sand gathered around it over the years. The coastline shifted. The island, once cut off from the mainland, became permanently joined to it. Alexander had not only taken a city, he had redrawn the map itself. 7 months of stone, fire, ships and blood ended with more than a captured city. It opened the road to Egypt. It broke Persian naval power on the eastern Mediterranean. It changed the coastline for good. And it proved that Alexander's most dangerous weapon was never just his army. It was his refusal to accept that anything, even the sea, was impossible to conquer.